We're starting a seminar. Hello and welcome to the webinar on smart specialization analysis. Today we have three speakers, including myself. We have Cristina Cagderi, who is a regional economist and a researcher focusing on systems of innovation and smart innovation environments. Since 2005, she has been working with Eurenio on numerous national and EU projects. She's an assistant professor at School of Spatial Planning and Development at Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. We have my colleague Alistair Reid here as well, who has worked extensively on designing and evaluating European, national and regional research and innovation projects since mid-90s, and during the 2000s. He led a series of EU research and innovation policy benchmarking and analysis platforms such as Trend Charts and Innovation. And in the last 5 years, he has advised and supported European level partnerships and initiatives in a range of sectors and technologies. Since 2 years ago, Alistair is a policy director at the European Future Innovation System Center in Brussels and has worked intensively on the implementation of 3 Horizon 2020 projects, including online S3 that we are going to briefly present you with today on the specialization analysis part, at least. My name is Vladimir Cvijanovic. I'm also working with Alistair at the European Future Innovation System Center, and I have academic and consultancy experience, and have worked on many different topics, including industrial innovation policies and economics of innovation. I've been working on the projects you are going to hear more about since last year, since I got employed at EFIS. So much for the introduction. I think you'll be more interested to hear about the specialization analysis.
Good morning from my side. Are you able to see my screen, my presentation?
Yes. Okay.
Well, I'm about to provide a short introduction about our project and its background. For example, why we think the online S3 is important, and how did we come up with the idea to develop it. And also, after we will see that what it's really about is a list, a platform or a repository, however you want to call it. It is a platform of online tools and methods that facilitate the registry process. Then we need to understand how this can be used, not in the sense of a manual. We'll not do a training on using each one of them separately, because they are 29 tools. But what types of combinations that one can make depending on the stage of the registry process, or the problems, the exact problems that one wants to solve. So, as a background information, I wanted to explain that we had been involved in the initial phase of the registry design in many regions, and we identified a lot of gaps in terms of analytical tools and methods that these regions or countries were using. And despite the fact that many methodologies are described in the registry guide published by the JRC, very few policy documents show an indication that at least some of these tools were used. The reasons for that is that many regions have a lack of data, especially data that need time series analysis, or information from different sources, not only Eurostat. Another problem is that there is a lack of capabilities and a lot of difficulties in managing and combining data sets with different types of data. For these reasons, we developed the Online S3 project, which basically is an e-policy platform, which includes a toolbox of applications and online services that aim to assist the national and regional authorities in their task to elaborate the smart specialization agenda. And these tools are not only supposed to be used in the initial phase of the RIS3 design process, but also in the implementation phase and in separate parts of the regional policy making. If we extract and combine, mix and match these tools with different logic. So the tools that we developed, it is 29 tools in total, and we have organized them in 6 phases based on the methodology and the guidance provided by the JRC and the European Commission. The first phase, I will just give you an overall idea of the organization of the tools in the platform, and then as a second step, I will show you alternative ways of combining these tools depending on what problem the user wants to solve. So the first phase is about refers to government and stakeholder engagement and implies a quadruple helix approach. So here we have tools that assist policymakers with engaging stakeholders, tools that promote the use of online debate platforms, and tools that include information and references to data related to a SIF. The second step has tools. The second phase has tools with regards to analysis of the context. Here we have all the statistical analysis tools and visualization tools that provide background information of the region or the country, which are of course necessary for any strategic planning process in order to identify the regional specificities and provide also information with regards to the existing institutional setting. So we have here applications like, I don't know if you can see it very well in your screen. We have tools based on the statistical sets of Eurostat, but also of scientific publications from Scopus, cluster observatory, so different sources of information and different databases. The third tool, the third phase, sorry, is about the vision sharing. It reflects to the strategic and the project-oriented character of the RIS3, and highlights the existence of a bottom-up approach in defining the vision of the region. The next phase is a priority setting, which includes information that help to manage the entrepreneurial discovery process events, identify areas of potential future specialization, and also detect industry segments with some kind of extroversion. The fifth phase is the policy mix, which refers to the definition of the implementation process and the strategy through action plan design, and stressing the needs for a structured project-driven approach to RIS3 implementation. Here we have a lot of tools in this phase, tools that identify future possible measures to achieve the vision, tools that engage users and stakeholders in co-designing solutions, tools that constitute repositories for open data collection and visualization, and also tools with regards to budgeting options of the measures that will be taken. The final phase of our platform and the applications that this phase includes are about monitoring, and here we have the tools indicate the need for developing tools for data collection and processing as a key instrument for evaluation of the implemented actions. So we have the tools, two groups of tools, two categories of tools, one for management and monitoring, and tools assessing beneficiaries' satisfaction. So this is the whole idea. If you see it overall, it's quite concrete, too many tools, and very difficult to be used, all of them at once, especially in later stages of the RIS3 design. So the challenge here is how can we select the best tools that we need in order to solve the problem that we have at the moment. Having these conversations, we identified with 4 different roadmaps on how to use this wide range of tools. The first one is if you see, here is the screenshot of the RIS3 platform, of the online RIS3 platform, sorry. And in the tab roadmaps, there is a drop-down menu of the 4 possible roadmaps. It is the mini S3, the entrepreneurial discovery process, the specialization roadmap, and the vertical roadmap. So the first roadmap is the mini S3 roadmap. It is just a selection of the most important tools that need to be can be used for the RIS3 process. They cover the whole range of it, and they can be grouped in 3 categories: tools that provide an analysis of the region, tools with regards to the design of the action plan and the policy measures, and tools that can be used in the implementation phase. So an alternative to using the 29 applications in total, the user might want to consider only a sample of these tools that will give an overall idea and a significant input with regards to RIS3. The second roadmap is a roadmap that facilitates the entrepreneurial discovery process, which is an interactive bottom-up process to determine the promising sectors of the region for investments and future competitiveness. So during the ADP, different entrepreneurial actors are brought together in a government-led participatory process. And the workflow that we provide here in this screenshot contains applications and guides to conduct the ADP, and they are divided in 3 sections. The first is knowledge production, the second is stakeholder engagement, and the third group of applications is about knowledge sharing and collaborative decision making. And the tools that belong in each of these groups can be shown below, like in the red box, we have regional assets mapping, regional scientific production profile, and the specialization indexes. In the second, we have research infrastructure mapping, clusters, incubators, and innovation ecosystems, and vision sharing. And in the third one, we have the EDP focus groups and the debate at a glance. The third roadmap is about the specialization analysis, which can help the EDP process in prioritizing choices. It also facilitates public and private investment decision-making in the RIS3 priority areas, and also supports system of monitoring and evaluation, as it makes possible to change in a real-time sense the regional specialization during the RIS3 process. I will not stay more in this roadmap, as Alistair and Vladimir will explain more. And the last one is the vertical roadmap, which is targeted to the thematic areas to the thematic priority areas. So once a region identifies an area of specialization, it can use some of these proposed tools in order to identify its position in the global value chain, or areas of competitiveness with regards to other regions that have the same priority as the region itself. So these are the four options, and it is not that one can use the one or the other. The user might need to conduct the specialization analysis as a part of the EDP process and provide the results at some point there. Or when focusing on the vertical, on the thematic area, and trying to identify, for example, the place of the region in the agri-food value chain, then we might need to conduct the specialization analysis in specific stages of this process, and then also include the EDP, parts of the EDP roadmap to identify the investment priorities and the measures that the region will take. So this is the overall idea of the four roadmaps. In a sense, I wanted to make you aware that there is a wide list of applications, but these applications can be used in a mix and match way, so that they can cover different needs according to what the users want.
Thank you very much for your talk, Christina.
Thanks very much, Vladimir. Good afternoon, I think, to most people. There may be people in a time zone behind us, so it's good morning to them. It's a pleasure to give this brief presentation as part of the webinar. Both Vladimir and Christina emphasized, I think, in their introductions, we're at the end of this project, which has been an intense period of a couple of years, developing a series of tools, which Christina has given a good overview of. We wanted to focus this webinar on the specialization roadmap, and Vladimir's presentation after my talk will give you a view on the details of that and in more detail. But first of all, I would like to give you some ideas and go back a little bit towards what, if I can get the, oh, there we go. Go back to some of the key messages from the RIS3 guide, which I think are key to understanding the role of specialization analysis as part of the smart specialization process. And I think one of the key things that people have, I think in some regions and indeed in some countries, have misunderstood is that smart specialization is really about specialization. I think we've had this discussion at many events. Is it about focusing on a few very specific areas, or is it about trying to build on new emerging niche, which it would be my interpretation, to drive economic transformation? So actually, the first quote I put here from the Risk-Free Guide of 2012, what's Risk-Free about? It's about differentiation. So it's specialization driving new forms of economic development, new competitive advantage by diversifying your economy. So we have the economies, the science systems as they are at day zero of the smart specialization process. We want to understand where are our strengths, where are our points of improvement, where do we have groups of companies, where do we have groups of scientists working together that can give us specific advantage. But particularly we want to understand where are there areas that could be emerging from that overall situation that could give us future advantage and help us to transform our regional economies, generate new value added in the economies, better integrate global value chains, and so on. And I think one of the key aspects that the Commission in its 2012 guide underlined was that there is no single integrated method that delivers this unique answer to where are your niche, where are your areas of future competitive advantage. And it requires quite a mix of methods being applied in order to understand where the specialization is. So I'll try and zoom in a bit because it seems I can't show the full screen. But the specialization process can be thought of in three ways. I think first of all, we can think about it, and this is, I think, how a lot of the specialization analysis has been done in at least the first phase of Risk-Free, and we'll see as regions move towards renewing their strategies whether they use similar processes. But a lot of the activities that have been done have been looking at sort of consensus around where have we got opportunities for new specialization, for new sectors to emerge by crossing existing knowledge with new emerging technologies and so on. So the first line here, the participatory processes, a lot of the Risk-Free were based on working group methods, bringing together experts from business, science, public sector, and so on, trying to build a consensus around where is the specialization. And of course, there are different tools and methods that can be used there. And I think those will be at least in part captured in our EDP roadmap, which gives different tools for running an entrepreneurial discovery process. But sort of newer ones that can be used, for instance, are crowdsourcing or online voting for priorities. The statistical and mapping analysis allows a sort of revealed specialization. So we have a whole set of data on the sort of baseline economic scientific specialization based on official data sets. This can be combined with different sets of data coming from what you can call microdata, or at least more open data sets, or even big data sets where possible, to try and capture in a more real-time process where are we actually, where's our specialization potential, where can we improve that specialization, where can we link up with other regions, other parts of a value chain that our companies are inserted in order to develop that potential further. And the third type of specialization process we can imagine is, I would say, through sort of foresight future specialization. So horizon scans of technologies and trends relevant for the region. We can run a Delphi process, a very classic foresight type process. This can feed in, of course, to entrepreneurial discovery process over time and feed ideas about future opportunities. And again, thinking about some of the smart specialization projects or processes I was involved in, Lithuania, for instance, where I did work, used that sort of future specialization approach. We helped them develop a framework for that. We ran sort of a horizon scan, looked at both international and national trends and opportunities, and that fed into the whole process in Lithuania. In terms of the, yeah, let's see. I'll just have to zoom out a bit here. Sorry about the technical difficulties. In terms of specialization methods, again, a lot of these were mentioned in the original RIS3 guide, and I think a lot of the regions have tried to use at least some of them. So, for instance, using reveal comparative advantage for trade exports. This is something which is often quite difficult to do at regional level due to the, in many regions, the absence of detailed export statistics. But I know that over the last 5 years, a lot of regions have tried to build their own export data and trade sets and used other techniques to try and identify opportunities in terms of export. Related variety analysis, so trying to identify where there are opportunities for combining sort of skill sets, technologies, existing companies to develop new sectors out of existing business and so on activities. Looking at the educational and skill specializations, so looking at science, technology, engineering and mathematics skills, so this would be a key area, but also KETS, so key enabling technology skills within the regional or national economy. I've been recently working in Armenia, and they're looking at, for instance, they've been able to almost count the number of people working, for instance, in artificial intelligence in that country. And that's sort of in terms of scale, it's a sort of a size of many European regions. So, you know, you're looking at maybe 10s or 20s of people, at least in the early stages of some emerging technologies, who are really skilled in those technologies, and probably a limited number of companies. So it's interesting to understand in those emerging technologies, which we know more traditional companies need to, over time, integrate those technologies. How many people are we producing from our education systems? How many people are working on that in business or in science, so that we have an understanding of needs for investment in education. Scientific specializations already mentioned, and Vladimir will say more, so I won't go into, but obviously you can use publications and citations, looking at co-publications with business and scientists, also not only within the region, but also internationally, to see how your region is linked to other regions and countries around Europe. We've done work like that, for instance, in the Highlands and Islands of Scotland, doing very detailed analysis of their cooperation patterns, and also in terms of technological specialization using patent data. Again, we've done similar analysis for a number of regions where you're able to look at the patent portfolio in the region, also link it to specific economic sectors. So there are tools which allow us to look at patents and link them to economic sectors and say, well, those patents which maybe in medical technologies can also be applied in other fields. It's not because they're categorized under a medical technology that they're not applicable to other fields. So these sorts of techniques are, I think, very useful for policymakers to get a real view. And I think just thinking about how specialization analysis can be used in the context of smart specialization, adopting a user perspective, I think the EDB process, I've already said, can use all this data that's available to inform working groups and panels, so that people are not just coming out with whatever their company is working on, but have a real view on where the real strengths and weaknesses of the region are. And sometimes people are very, not biased, but at least partial views of where the regional strengths are, because they know 3 or 4 companies or a group of scientists working on that field. They think their region is very strong. And when you put that sort of relative prioritization or specialization into perspective and show them that, in fact, in your region, yeah, you might be strong there, but not so strong as you thought on a relative scale compared to other regions around Europe or internationally. Public-private investment decisions. So where should available resources, and in the last few years there's been a lot of government budget cuts due to economic difficulties in a number of regions. We see as we go forward that structural funds will likely have a lower budget in the future, or at least a different budget. It will be allocated to different types of instruments. So again, these are very real decisions. Where do we invest? Where are the opportunities? Where are we investing currently? So I think that sort of mapping that we can do shows where public investment, for instance, is flowing currently. Which areas is it flowing? Does it match with the priority areas that have been identified through other specialization? And then as we go forward in terms of monitoring and evaluation, we can also track in real time, are we actually prioritizing, are we focusing on the specialization areas we were thinking about? So some of the questions that you might ask doing a specialization analysis, obviously, how is our country or region positioned in key technologies necessary to support the development of high value added or knowledge intensive sectors, or to tackle some of the societal challenges that we might be facing in terms of climate change or resource efficiency, for instance, or social challenges. How are investments channeled via the risk-free? How are they actually influencing future specialization? And what is the potential to build on these existing specialization to anticipate or prepare for future global trends and technologies, or again, more societal type market trends and so on. So I think one of the things we then thought was, how do we then look at the potential for what sort of flow of information would policymakers be thinking about when policymakers and partners in the smart specialization process, what sort of information flow would they be thinking about? So this diagram that I'm showing now, you will see a version in the next presentation, so I won't go into detail, but we try to look at the sort of different blocks that any person interested in how their region is performing, or where the investment flows are going, and how things are changing over time. So we try to do a sort of logical flow map of how that could work out, going from the baseline situation on the left through a series of steps for investment into business R&D, for instance, or investment in education to get the sort of skill sets we need, into how that actually changes the economy, how that changes scientific specialization and output, and in the long run, how that helps to transform, as I said at the beginning, the regional economy or the national economy towards new, more knowledge intensive or higher value added sectors, with obviously a sort of circular effect and impact back onto the baseline situation. So that's my concluding words at this stage, and I'll now hand back to Vladimir and if you have any questions, of course, we can take them now or at the end of the webinar. Thanks very much.
I hope you can all see my presentation. I think you can. In smart specialization strategies, it is somehow necessary to undertake specialization analysis, not just at the beginning, but also on a permanent basis, so that you can see what has changed. As already said, the Online S3 project developed some tools that you can use with smart specialization strategies, and we hope that in particular the conceptual framework for smart specialization will be of use to you. But let me first guide you through the state of the art, or which methods the regions were using before this project, based on a report that my colleagues wrote. The regions happen not to follow steps as laid down in European Commission's guide from 2012, so they didn't follow exactly the steps. They just mixed the methods and picked various ones depending on their data sources, on availability of experts, and I guess many other things. We surveyed 30 countries or regions to look at what methods they used, and what we found is that they normally used more than 4 methods for analysis of their context. You can see here in the third bullet point the frequency of methods used, and some of the usual suspects are there: regional profiling, SWOT analysis, working groups, focus groups, benchmarking. Other methods listed here, of course, but not all of them are directly helpful when it comes to the actual analysis that is useful with smart specialization strategies. What can be really helpful is a method like regional profiling, benchmarking, bibliometric analysis, and all those and different analytical methods that give you output that is palpable and that is not entirely subjective. But of course, the regions and countries surveyed used also other methods which are widespread and can be used in many contexts, and such as the SWOT analysis, work groups and focus groups, which give you perhaps a more nuanced view of the situation in your region, but then are not entirely precise when it comes to the actual analysis. What we developed is a suggestion for a specialization analysis called Specialization Roadmap, as already mentioned by both Christina and Alistair. You can find it online. I have a clickable slide here, but let me just guide you through the most important points. The diagram is structured in three basic parts. On the left-hand side, you see the baseline situation for which we foresaw that 10 apps could be used to scan it, to analyze it. In the second phase, and of course, as a result of investments, you have the second block, second part of second area that is worth considering, and that is the that is shown here in 4 blocks: funding for business RD&I, funding for business innovation support, investment in postgraduate courses, science investment, R&D by field. And in the last phase, you have the so-called effects of those investments, which Alistair has already mentioned. So again, you can use some further applications to analyze the current situation in those areas. The specialization roadmap, as shown, looks static, but it has to be observed in a dynamic way. It has to be observed in, namely, a circular, from a circular perspective, as shown on the left-hand side of this slide. So after you have determined the baseline specialization situation, you need to see, of course, which investments occurred and which effects they made. So you need to measure changes and outcomes related to those investments in the third step. And in the fourth step, which brings you back to step 1, actually, you need to compare results with baseline data. So this is the way we thought this should work, in particular with the applications that we developed. The specialization roadmap can be found online here. You can see the website address. If not, just go to the online S3 platform and look for it under roadmaps here. And pick specialization roadmap. You'll see the same picture. It's just that it's clickable, so that you can see the short description, what economic structure, for example, is, or what public budgetary funds are, etc. Or on the other hand, there are these little icons representing the various applications or tools developed by the project. So, for example, for economic structure, you have several applications that you can use, one of them being regional assets mapping, the other one benchmarking. Then when you click further to the right, you have specialization indexes, extraversion analysis, related variety analysis, and that's all for the economic structure. You can, of course, click on any of the other blocks for which an icon is shown, and that will lead you directly to the application. You can let me go back to the presentation. You can of course click on, if you want to analyze economic structure, you can click directly on the link provided below in this pop-up window and open the application. Let me just show you how it works. As an example, I'm already logged into on the platform, so I just easily access the application. I'll skip the introductory part. So there are several blocks that you can see up above: demography and society, economy and labor, structural business statistics, and so on. So you can pick any of them, say economy and labor, for all of the years. You can pick the region that you'd like to analyze, or regions for that purpose, depending on your choice here below. And then you just pick the variables which you'd like to see analyzed. For example, I can pick gross domestic product, the easiest one to show right now in this demonstration. And there you go. You can see the bar chart, which you can then download in different formats or insert directly in report. As to economic structure, there are also, as I previously explained, other applications, and I will not go through each and every one of them because this would take me too much time. As this is just a demonstration of how it works and a suggestion, of course. For benchmarking, you can see an example here. It's also in the platform, and mind you, the presentations will be available after the webinar, so you'll be able to see and reach the same things I'm able to click on from my presentation. It just gives you an overview of what an analysis using the application on benchmarking could be like. In this case, it's an analysis of the region of the city of Düsseldorf in Germany. And this case study compares this region with a set of 20 other regions, previously, according to previously specified set of criteria, for which you can also use the application T21, regional assets mapping. There are other applications which you can use here: specialization indexes and extroversion analysis, for example. It's in italics because it's a signpost to other applications externally developed. They can still be used, of course, and particularly helpful could be related variety analysis. So if you just go back to the Specialization Roadmap, you can again, let me remind you, discover it here. So I can go to related variety analysis. I click on open the app, and there you go. I can access the application. We can pick, for example, Denmark, why not? And the region of Hovedstaden. And there you go. The application shows the very graphic and visual way of presenting related variety, which is of course very important in smart specialization analysis, and shows in this case which regions have a particular specialization forte in certain sectors, and which sectors correlate with certain other sectors. In the menu on top, you can see that this first part is on sectors present in the region. So, for example, if I click on those circles, the text on each of the sector will pop up. So the first one is a wholesale trade, except motor vehicles and motorcycles. The second one, retail trade, except motor vehicles and motorcycles. The numbers shown are number of workers in the respective regions. If I would like to see sectoral specialization, that's the second tab. And here you'll see certain circles that are marked white, and yet some others that are marked green, that are highlighted in green. Those highlighted in green are sectors with a specific specialization. So, for example, wholesale trade, except motor vehicles and motorcycle, has a specialization. Computer programming, consultancy, and related activities has a specialization as well. And so you can see in one place which sectors have a specialization. The third tab is on specifically technological specialization, counted as taking into account the number of patents each region has. But there you see an analysis getting yet more complex. So on top of white and green circles, you have, for example, one marked red, which is intended to show a sector or sectors with working and patent specialization. You can, of course, click on it, and you'll see that it's the manufacture of basic pharmaceutical products and pharmaceutical preparations, and of course, the number given is the number of workers. You will also see in the fourth tab which sectors are correlated. For that, you need to click on the red circle if there is any, and for this region, there is one. So it's again manufacture of basic pharmaceutical products and pharmaceutical preparations. You click on it again, you double click on it, sorry, and there you see a square popping up, which means that this previously mentioned sector is correlated with manufacture of chemicals and chemical products. So this analysis could be then saved as image and used further in your analysis and for your purposes. I will not go into details on some applications, as already said. I'll just briefly mention them. So for public budgetary funds, we developed the application on budgeting, which is very nice and useful, because we hadn't discovered any application dealing with that, but it's also quite complex to use, so I'll skip it here. On innovation support system, you can again use the regional assets mapping, the app that I have just shown you, but also research infrastructure mapping. So let me click on that one. You can see here in this application, using external data, you can see national research infrastructures. Clicking on the menu to your right, you'll see the sectors for which they concern, whether it's chemistry, biology, engineering and energy, humanities and arts, etc. You can select the research infrastructure type, whether it's distributed, single-sited, or virtual, and you can also select the country. So if you select, for example, Austria, you select biological and medical sciences. You select the single-sited infrastructure. You'll of course see that Austria has a few 9, if I can read well on this map, 9 research infrastructures that you were looking for. So it's also quite useful and handy when it comes to analysis of the innovation ecosystem, and in particular research infrastructures. Another application is a signpost to external applications, but very useful ones. So that is the one marked 2.3 on clusters, incubators, innovation, ecosystem mapping. But I'll skip that one. when it comes to education and training system and research system, there is again the application on research infrastructure mapping, clusters, incubators, innovation ecosystem mapping, but also innovation maps and application 2.5 regional scientific production profile, for which I can show you just briefly our report, so you can see what the European Commission did in its report on scientific production profiles. So you can do similar things using our application, but that will not be done at this point. The second part of the picture previously shown concerns the investment part. So for that part, as to funding for business research, development, innovation, and funding for business innovation support services in particular, we would use innovation maps, the use of which I'm just going to show you very briefly on the subsequent slides. And you can use the same application for investment in vocational education and educational training and postgraduate courses, as well as for science investment, research and development by field. This analysis of this part of the Smart Specialization Analysis Roadmap can be also supported by the app on budgeting. I made some screenshots of the data of the output provided by the application 5.6 Innovation Maps, and there you can see a geoscatter plot of certain European regions and countries, and in the online version of this application you can toggle between number of projects pursued in a particular region, and the amount of funding being given to certain sectors. Or you can as well use heat maps, and here you can see in the screenshot a heat map produced by the application Innovation Maps, which shows specialization in certain scientific sectors using NUBS classification on the y-axis and the OECD classification, which you can't see here in the picture, but I know, on the x-axis. You can play with it yourself. You can download sample data, and you can produce the same images or various others depending on which regions you choose when you use the application. Last but not least, the third part of the picture was concerned the effects of investment. Some of the effects of these investments can be simply analyzed using available data, for which and for those parts we haven't yet developed applications, but you may of course comment later on and perhaps suggest something even. For some other purposes, such as change in share of sector of experts by value, there is the application on specialization indexes, application 2.6, and extroversion analysis, which uses other applications, etc., etc. So you can see what I can see, and use the clickable online version of the specialization analysis, which will then lead you directly to the applications, and you can then directly use them. I wanted to stop right there. I hope that was a useful overview of the applications and ways of analyzing the for Smart Specialization. Use some references there, mostly or all of them concerning the output of our project. But what I wanted to get to now is certain issues for debate. And there you can see the questions that we are proposing for debate. You can, of course, ask your own questions. We would be interested to know overall how useful the developed roadmap is, and how useful you find the online tools and apps that we presented. Whether you in your usage use other methods to undertake specialization analysis, whether you use any online tools that could be applied to specialization analysis that we do not know of, for example. What additional functionalities would you would like to see? For example, some visualization, statistical analysis, and certain other things that may be of particular use to you in your practice. And last but not least, some of your thoughts, ideas for possible collaboration, or even for us. I forgot to mention in the beginning, we are currently writing a white paper on smart specialization and the use of online tools to help support it. So if you are at any point interested in collaborating or have certain questions, feel free, of course, to email us.